What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. In this video we're not going to be doing any car stuff, but we will be going over what tools I have in my toolbox, and maybe that'll give you an idea if you're starting to work on cars as to what tools you want to buy for yourself. It is sort of a long video, but it goes through all the tools that I own and what I started with. So having said that, let's get started. So the way I have my area in the garage set up is in here I have my electric power tools. So I have my angle grinder, buffer. I also have a couple pneumatic tools, my impact gun and my 3/8 inch ratchet, and a belt sander, tire pressure gauge. And down here I have all my detailing stuff and some sandpaper. So that's it for that. The air compressor that I use is a 21-gallon Harbor Freight or Central Pneumatic air compressor. It works great. It goes up to 125 PSI and it's never given me any issues. I change the oil on it once a year and I don't use it very often. Oh, and I consider this one of my tools as well. This actually is a hood prop and I use it on pretty much any vehicle that has hood struts because I never trust them. So that's the perfect length for most of the vehicles that I work on as a hood prop. I have a couple mirrors just in case I need a mirror for anything. I have a box of Sharpies and whatnot. Here I have a brake flaring kit and a tap and die set, as well as a compression tester. Definitely recommend to get a tap and die set and a compression tester. They're very useful. They're cheap at Harbor Freight and they work great for people that don't use them all day every day. These are empty, but these are just little tiny storage compartments that I have here. And I have some gloves here, rubber gloves, some hose clamps and other random things, a fuse, and then more random stuff here. 2 turkey basters so you can suck fluid from like power steering reservoirs and brake reservoirs. And in these, this is actually my original toolbox. Like that's what I started working on cars with, that toolbox right there, which if you look at the size difference, it's tiny. But it fit all the tools that I needed and it worked great. Now I just use it as storage for old spare parts. So if I take a part off of a car that's still good and replace it with a new one, I'll keep the old part just in case. Funnels are right here. Everybody should have funnels because you always make a mess. I rarely use them and often make a mess. So learn from me, use your funnel. Here I have a Harbor Freight tire bead separator, which works great. I've used it plenty of times to mount and dismount tires. Note on that though, it only works with very high profile tires. So when the sidewall is very thick, that's when it works. I've only ever had luck with it on tires that are 65 sidewall or higher. Going down, that's just an old Honda Accord head unit. Like I said, original sub from the Lexus, and some gloves there. Always have gloves. I have another pile of gloves here on the ground that I'm planning on washing, which is why it's on the ground. Usually they're nicely organized down there. Speaking of down here, I got some washer fluid, always in stock. Spray paint, a bunch of it, because you never know when you need it. I got drill bits, and then in the back there are just old socket trays that I keep because they're useful and they work. They just don't fit with the arrangement of tools that I have in this toolbox right here, which we'll get to in a second. Heat shrink. Always a good idea to have heat shrink if you're working on wiring. You always want to protect your connections that you make, and obviously little crimp connectors right there. If you're doing anything with brakes, I recommend one of these, unless you have a friend always with you, but I recommend one of these hand pump vacuum brake bleeders. They're super useful. You basically just put one end, it has a little reservoir, you put the other end of the reservoir on the bleeder, and then you make vacuum, and it sucks fluid through, therefore bleeding your brakes. Here I have some note cards because that's what I used to paint rims with. You shove it in between the tire and the rim and then you paint it. An old high flow catalytic converter that used to be on the Corolla. My top shelf is basically just a place for partially random things and partially things that didn't have room anywhere else, as well as screwdrivers. So I have screwdrivers, pry bars on this side. I'm actually missing a pry bar. I have one small one that goes here. I have zip ties. Zip ties are always a great idea to have. My electric impact gun, which is awesome. Then I have a bunch of lighting stuff here. I have ignition coil connectors for the 96 Camry. They tend to break inside, like that plastic fitting right there breaks off, so I have extra connectors. I have some LED lights, and then everything that goes with LED lighting, some lighters either to light up a torch or for heat shrink. They work great. LED strip, just a random power steering line that I have to put in. That's about it for here. This is just, like I said, a bit of a dumping ground for my temporary tools slash random stuff. Going down, you want ratchets and extensions. That's very important. When I started working on cars, all I had was this 1/2-inch ratchet. That's it. Like this one right here that I'm holding, which is now worn out, which is why I have another one right here. But after that, I upgraded and I got a couple 3/8 ratchets, a set of 1/4-inch sockets and a ratchet, and then another 1/4-inch ratchet, as well as a bunch of extensions. It's important to have different types of extensions. So you want straight extensions, you want swivel head extensions, and you also want impact extensions, which are not made of chrome. They are more sturdy, and if you use a chrome extension with a very powerful impact gun, you can risk shattering it, and you don't want to shatter it because then it'll just go everywhere. It's dangerous, and you're wasting an extension basically. So you want to have impact extensions, whether they're swivel or straight, doesn't matter. You can always get swivel heads for the extension if they're not swivel and you need one. But same goes for, so these are all 1/2-inch right here. Same goes for 3/8, which I have 4 of, and 1/4-inch right here, as well as a spark plug socket. Always have a spark plug socket, whether it's this type where it's connected to a little extension shaft or just the socket itself. They make just sockets which you can put on your own extensions. I like this one because it's connected. So when you pull out the socket and extension, it doesn't disconnect right here. There's no chance of it falling off. A couple adapters, also important to have. I then proceeded to buy some Torx sockets right here and some Allen heads. Those are useful. I rarely use them, but they're very useful to have. Going down, related to ratchets and extensions, are sockets. So I have a bunch of different sockets. When I started working on cars, and I only had that 1/2-inch ratchet that I show you, this was my only set of sockets right here. It's a 12-point 1/2-inch set from Stanley, and they work great, but they are 12 points, which means if you're dealing with rusty bolts, it'll just round them off. And they're also chrome, so they're not very safe for using on impacts, unless you're using a low powered one. Then my next set of sockets that I bought was this impact rated socket set. They're shallow. These are also shallow, but these are shallow 6-point 1/2-inch. So I upgraded to that. Recently, after I bought these, I said, oh, I need deep sockets. So I bought this set of deep impact sockets, which works great. I use all 3 of these all the time. And then I proceeded to upgrade to some 3/8. When I bought my 3/8 ratchet, it actually came, this is all from Harbor Freight, by the way. So other than the Stanley set and the Craftsman ratchet, this is all Harbor Freight stuff. And for a weekend mechanic, they were great. I have no complaints. They're cheap, they're reliable. When I got my 3/8 ratchet, this one right here, it came with these 2 sets of sockets, just shallow 12-point 3/8 sockets, and these are metric. Those are standard. I don't use the standards, which is why they're in the back, but the metrics, as you can see, are up front right here. I use them all the time. And then I upgraded to some deep sockets for the 3/8 because you always need some deep sockets for when you have a stud sticking out of a bolt, or you just need that little extra reach. And recently I got some swivel 1/2-inch sockets for the impact, and they're great. Also Harbor Freight. The only downside is they don't come with all sizes, so you are missing some important sizes. There's no 12, it starts with a 13. You don't have a 16, which I guess you don't really need that often, but you never know. And then it goes up to 21. So they're good, but you can also get these universal joint extensions, or swivel adapters, I guess, to fit onto these types of sockets or an extension. But the only downside is when you use these, you can bind it up. So like if you put it in a bind like this, it won't spin anymore. And once your bolt comes loose, if you're not paying attention and you don't stop that gun immediately, this will just keep flinging around and throwing your sockets all over the place. So it can be dangerous. Axle nut sockets and O2 sensor socket. You have to have at least one axle nut socket that fits your own car and an oxygen sensor socket. Those are universal. They're just 7/8 sockets, but they're special because they have a cutout on them so you can put the wire through. They also make a crow's foot oxygen sensor socket, so it's not a tubular socket. It's just like a little wrench type looking socket. So those work great too. Like I said, moving on down here, it's great to have a variety of wrenches. I don't have a big variety of wrenches, just a basic set from Harbor Freight and then a little Craftsman set here. But I do have a couple extra. These are flare nut wrenches, great for brake lines and fuel lines. That way, because you can't get a closed end on it, you have to get the open end on it. And as you can see, this only holds on to 2 sides, but this actually holds on to 4 sides. So that's basically 4 times the grip that you get there. Needle nose pliers, very, very useful. They are a little rusty on the surface, but you can always just sand it down, paint it if you want, but obviously that's just gonna come off right away. So just keep them in an area where it doesn't rain. This might have been caused by me by taking them to the junkyard when it was raining. So other pliers, you got adjustable pliers, an adjustable wrench, always useful, and vice grips. You need vice grips. They're so useful for anything that you need to hold on to, whether it's a bolt, a stripped or a broken bolt head. You can clamp things down with it. You get small ones, big ones. You have needle nose vice grips, which they're right there. They make ones with a bigger opening, deeper teeth. They make welders vice grips or pliers, which are basically big, like a big C-clamp that locks together. So there's a lot of them that you can buy, but at least have 1 or 2 pairs of vice grips. They're very useful. Continuing with pliers, these are not really pliers, but they are wire strippers. If you're dealing with wires at all, these are a little rusty, but I have this other pair here that is in better condition. You can't really get around not having them. If you want to do wiring in a clean manner and do it right, you just need wire strippers, whether it's this kind or the automatic kind where they have a big head on top, and when you press it down, it automatically strips it to the correct size. These are more of a manual process because you have to find the size of the wire, but they still work great. Obviously, I'm going to link everything that you just saw down in the description so you can get them. Moving on, I wouldn't say you necessarily need this, but it is very useful to have a mirror, especially on one of those extending sticks right here, because you can put it down into tight areas, especially if you're coming from like the back of the engine or something where you can't see what's going on. You just stick this mirror down, and with a flashlight you can see what's happening down there. Continuing with extendable tools, you have this magnet right here. I actually have 3 magnets, a little tiny one that's right here, like a pen-sized one, this huge one that's pretty strong, and it just stuck to my vice grips. I keep this is difficult, there we go. I keep this just in the back of the toolbox. I have a little tiny mirror as well, and then I have a little bendy magnet. Those are very useful if you drop a bolt or a socket or whatever it might be that you drop down in the engine, or not in the engine, but in the engine bay. Picks are not absolutely necessary, but they are useful. These are just a small set, like a mini set of picks, but you can get bigger ones if you need to. These work great for me. I don't use them often because I don't really need to use picks very often. And this is just, these are not like tools or anything. That's just exhaust gaskets that I have laying around from old exhaust jobs, and a couple flanges. All right, moving on. In my bottom drawer, I have hammers. Now, I know these are not automotive hammers. It's a carpenter's hammer, but that's all I got, so I'm gonna use it. And wire brushes. I have a whole collection of wire brushes from trash to brand new, and I use them all the time. I got plastic, brass, and steel. I don't use the plastic and the brass very often. The plastic I use for cleaning up junk, like gunky materials, if I'm degreasing something. But the steel ones I'll use for cleaning up rust or welds or whatever. But it is very useful to have a wire brush, and you don't need a big one. You can get away with like a small one like this. These are good for brake jobs, or even smaller. You can get these right here, which are even better for brake jobs. Some giant adjustable pliers. You never know when you need these, and I have had to use these on like tie rods. Believe it or not, I've had to use these on oil filters. Speaking of oil filters, it's great to have an oil filter socket, whether it's this type, which is not adjustable, or they also make an adjustable one, which is like a strap that you strap around the oil filter, like a belt, and that self-adjusts to whatever size you need. But I'm mainly dealing with this size oil filters on the cars I maintain, so I only bought this because this is all I needed, and it's cheaper than the strap one. Breaker bar. You need a breaker bar if you are dealing with big bolts on cars and even medium-sized bolts, you need a breaker bar. This is a 2-foot breaker bar. This is not my first one. I actually broke my first one. I'll overlay a picture here. I was trying to loosen up an axle nut and it wouldn't loosen up, so I put a pipe on it to extend it, and that broke my breaker bar. So this is my second breaker bar, but it works great. Bought it from Harbor Freight, just like pretty much everything else in my toolbox. But like I said, I'll link it down in the description. Pickle fork. If you are doing ball joints and tie rods, you need a pickle fork. You can get the special separator tools that they make, but this is like $5 or $10, and then you have it forever, as opposed to however much money those separators cost. Which are useful because if you're trying to undo a ball joint without breaking the boot around it, then you need one of those, or you could just use a hammer. But these are quicker and sometimes a lot more efficient. Moving along, I have angle grinder attachments here, cutting wheels, wire brushes, and grinding discs. Basically, if you have an angle grinder, you'd want all these attachments. All right, pardon the mess, but it is winter, so everything is stuffed in the garage. Down there, I have a huge container with spare old used parts, but they still work. I have a couple boxes just for storage if I need them. Up here, I have a chop saw for my metal cutting needs, and some exhaust pipes. I do a lot of exhaust work, so I have chop saw and welder that I'll show you in a little bit. Up here on the top shelf where it's out of the way, I keep a heat gun. You always need a heat gun, and I keep empty bottles of oil. And why do I keep those? Well, that's because when I do an oil change, I don't have anywhere to put the old oil, and I don't always use the full 5 quarts. So like if I do an oil change on my Corolla, for example, it only takes 4 quarts. So in the new bottle, then I'm left over with a fresh quart of oil that I want to keep, and I need an old bottle to dump the used oil in. So that's why I keep those around. I got a little bottle of coolant up there just in case I need it. And that's about it. I got my old manual non-power mirrors, some more empty bottles, and a Lexus headlight, original one because they're expensive. One thing that you might see back there is Purple Power. Purple Power is great, or if you want to use some other type of degreaser cleaner, they work great if you're degreasing engine parts or transmissions or the underneath of the car, subframe, or whatever you might be degreasing. I've used it on basically all the things that I just mentioned, including the floor. I've done like carpets with it, automotive carpets, not interior carpets. I've done the garage floor with it. As you can see, I have some more microfibers in there. I believe those are clean, just not put away. And that is my box of spare light bulbs. Here I have some spare hardware. I keep all the spare hardware that I possibly can because you never know when you need it. These are grade 8 OEM bolts and nuts, and like I said, you never know when you need it. I got strut bolts in here. I got subframe bolts, little small ones, nuts of all sizes, just everything, some brake hardware. And then I have a little mobile toolbox down here that I use if I go to the junkyard, which has some drawers in it. Right now it's empty because I have all my tools packed away, but I have some extra hardware down here that I have from my last junkyard trip, which I still haven't sorted through, but more hardware. Always get all the hardware that you can because you never know when you need it. Some paper towels or shop towels, whatever you're into, are always a great idea. And if you're looking into detailing and cleaning, microfibers, also a great idea. One thing that I did not go over in the video is what I consider to be a tool, and that's a code reader or a scanner, if you will. So what this is I have 2 of them actually. This is my first one that I bought. It's a super cheap $20 Amazon code reader, and that's exactly what it does. It just reads basic check engine light codes. But then I upgraded to this one, which I do recommend. It's a great tool to have. It'll do a lot more than just check engine lights. It'll do ABS, airbag, body control module codes, and transmission codes, like everything you can possibly think of. This will most likely read, and sometimes it'll give you extra information too. So if you're looking for a cheap scan tool, just go with this. It'll do the job. But if you're looking to get some deeper diagnosing, I would definitely go for something more like this. All right, so I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope it was helpful, and I hope it gave you some good information as to what tools you need or you want to buy when you start working on your car. Leave a comment down below with any tools that you think someone might need to get started, or maybe I mentioned tools that are absolutely not needed and it's completely pointless. Anyway, let me know down below. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.